People consistently report higher emotional well-being in their 70s and 80s than at any point in their 40s and 50s, despite declining health, reduced mobility, and the deaths of friends and partners. This U-shaped pattern of happiness across the lifespan, now replicated across dozens of countries, is one of the most surprising and counterintuitive findings in developmental psychology. Aging is not simply decline. It has its own gains. Erikson's sixth psychosocial stage spans young adulthood and centers on the conflict between intimacy and isolation. Having formed a stable identity in the previous stage, the young adult now faces the challenge of sharing that identity in deep, committed intimate relationships, romantic, but also close friendships and collaborative partnerships. The capacity for genuine intimacy requires a solid enough identity that one can merge and share without losing oneself. Failure to achieve intimacy produces isolation, the avoidance of deep commitment out of fear of loss of self, leaving the person socially connected but emotionally alone. Erikson's seventh stage spans middle adulthood, roughly from the late 30s through the 60s, and centers on generativity versus stagnation. Generativity is the concern for establishing and guiding the next generation through parenting, mentoring, teaching, or creative and civic contributions that will outlast the individual. It reflects a shift from personal identity and intimate relationships toward a broader concern with leaving a meaningful legacy. Stagnation occurs when the individual becomes self-absorbed, investing only in personal comfort and advancement without a sense of contribution to anything larger than themselves. Erikson's final stage, late adulthood, centers on the challenge of ego integrity versus despair. Ego integrity is the sense of having lived a full, meaningful life, the ability to look back with acceptance, even on regrets and failures, and to feel that the arc of one's life was coherent and worth having lived. It requires a sense that one's individual life fits into a larger historical and human framework. Despair arises when the review of one's life produces primarily bitterness, regret, and the feeling that time has run out without having lived meaningfully. The terror of death intensifies when despair rather than integrity is reached. Normal cognitive aging involves a consistent slowing of information processing speed beginning in the 20s and continuing across the lifespan. This slowing affects virtually all timed cognitive tasks and underlies much of the observed decline in fluid intelligence measures with age. Working memory capacity, the number of items that can be held and manipulated simultaneously, also declines. Together, these changes affect performance on novel problem-solving, tasks requiring rapid response, and tasks requiring simultaneous management of many pieces of information. Against the backdrop of fluid intelligence decline, aging brings genuine cognitive gains. Crystallized intelligence, vocabulary, general knowledge, and accumulated expertise remain stable through middle adulthood and declines only modestly afterward. Pattern recognition in familiar domains benefits from decades of experience. Most strikingly, emotional regulation and well-being improve with age. Older adults are better at avoiding negative emotions, resolving conflicts, and maintaining a positive affective state despite objective life challenges. This emotional expertise has been called the wisdom dividend of aging. Laura Carstenson's socio-emotional selectivity theory proposes that as people perceive their remaining time horizon as limited, they shift motivational priorities from information-seeking and future-oriented goals toward emotionally meaningful, present-oriented goals, specifically toward deepening close relationships while pruning peripheral ones. This explains the narrowing social network of older adults. It is not simply loss, but a strategic prioritization of the relationships that matter most. The theory correctly predicts that when young people have reason to perceive time as limited before a move, during illness, they also shift towards socializing with emotionally close others. Cognitive reserve is the accumulated neural and cognitive resources built through education, intellectually stimulating work, social engagement, and mental challenge that allows some individuals to withstand more neurological damage before showing clinical symptoms of dementia. People with high cognitive reserve show the same neuropathological changes as those with lower reserve, but do not show equivalent cognitive decline. The brain apparently recruits alternative neural networks to compensate for damage. Higher education, bilingualism, cognitively stimulating careers, and sustained social engagement all build cognitive reserve. Of all interventions studied for maintaining cognitive function with age, physical exercise has the strongest evidence base. Aerobic exercise promotes hippocampal neurogenesis, increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, improves cerebrovascular health, reduces inflammatory markers, and improves sleep quality, all of which support neural health with aging. Randomized trials have found that aerobic exercise training in sedentary older adults increases hippocampal volume and improves memory performance. The evidence is robust enough that exercise is now routinely recommended in clinical guidelines for dementia prevention. Adult development is not merely the slow dismantling of youth. It is a process with its own genuine gains, evolving priorities, and deepening wisdom. Erikson's later stages capture the existential challenges that give adult life its meaning, intimacy, generativity, and ultimately the integration of a life fully lived. The science of aging tells us that the years ahead are not simply years of decline. They are years of potential growth in the dimensions that matter most.